not everybody that I know is listening to my voice would be inclined to say something like Joe Biden is hashtag not my president. But it's striking to me, actually, that before Joe Biden was in office, we had a lot of people on the left saying Trump, not my president, right? He's not my president. And so there are kind of two schools of thought here. And I'm leaving aside for a second the idea that, Biden's not my president because he wasn't legitimately elected, right? I've expressed my views on that many times in this show. I do believe he won the election. So I'm really just talking about, like, he's not my president because he's such a dolt or because he's so mentally unfit, right? Because he's sort of left the room, he's vacant, he's the puppet of X, Y, and Z special interests, right? And with Trump too, it's always like, he's not my president because he's Putin's puppet, or he's not my president because he's such a racist, he's not my president because X, Y, and Z. That's like one school of thought. It's like, if this person is so atrocious and you are a free person, you don't have to recognize the right of this terrible person to rule over you. And the other school of thought is the kind of, I respect the office, but not the man school of thought, right? Which is much more emotionally difficult and draining, and puts a huge strain on our moral faculties, but which says, America as a country, she's in terrible times, she's in dire straits, and yet she is my country. I love her. I believe in her. I think she's the great country of the world, the great hope of the West. And I have such high respect for her institutions and for her political leaders in the abstract, that I am going to salute when Joe Biden walks by, or I'm going to, watch when Trump does his State of the Union, or, whatever. I'm going to call him Mr. President. I respect the office. I believe in America. And actually, it turns out that this goes even deeper, if you think about it, than this or that president, but goes into the foundations of the idea of having a country, right? Right now, America itself, it looks a way that I would suspect a lot of us are very dissatisfied with. I know I am. And I talk to kids, people younger than me, if you can imagine that there are, in fact, people younger than me. And I'm starting to feel like not that young a heretic myself, right? I'm 31 now. I just forget. But yeah, I'm 31 now. So I talk to kids who grow up and they've been living in an America that was like, they don't remember 9/11. And so they've always felt as if the government is in these forever wars overseas, and they're being taught what they know to be crazy nonsense in school. They lost a couple years of their youth to COVID, and they look around at America. And I talked about this with Charles Kessler, who's the editor of the Claremont Review of Books on our Claremont Review of Books podcast. Like, they look around and they see, as Charles points out, an America that is not a pretty sight. And they've never seen another America. They've never known, right, that this country could be great. And even I, who am relatively young, I grew up in the 90s, and I saw, even from abroad in London, but also when we moved here, I saw, the flowering, the height really of the best time to be alive anywhere on earth ever, right? And even before that, of course, you have the greatest generation who believed so firmly in what this country was. And we look back on the history of this country, and those of us who have lived through some good times are able to say, right, there is such a thing as America. I don't like America as currently constituted. I don't like what's happened to America. I don't like what America now means, what it exports around the world, what it does in other countries. We can be critical of all that while still saying, but America as a country is worth fighting for, worth saving, still good, right? There are a lot of people, a lot of kids, especially on the conservative movement and on the right, who look at the America they grew up in, and they have to conclude that actually there was never anything any good about this, and it was always doomed to failure. The revolution itself was an inherently kind of, postmodern project because it stripped away, this is not my view, but I'm kind of trying to represent this to you, right? It stripped away all tradition and just created this like endlessly liberal, classically liberal society with no boundaries on what could be said or done. And eventually we were bound to end up at Drag Queen Story Hour. I don't believe that. But I think that in order to maintain the belief that America is good and good as founded and that our regime is beautiful, you need to have this distinction between what you see around you, what's happening in our fallen world, what's happening in our dark times, and this distinction between what's happening in the world you see around you, in our fallen world, in our dark times. You need to distinguish between that and the nation itself, or the essence of America and what America was founded to be and can be and still has the potential to be again, right? That is the distinction that we make when we say things like Joe Biden's a terrible president, he's doing a terrible job. but he's my president. And there is a certain, I'm not therefore going to take up arms against the government, right? I'm going to try to weather this within the system of America rather than breaking it apart.